السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون. This is what basically has motivated us to have this series. How to get guidance from the Quran. A book that we believe has no doubt, has no skepticism in its message. And our belief is not based on some blind following. It is based on our own rational thinking, based on what we have studied. We believe that if we want to seek guidance from the one who created this universe, we can get the guidance. And we believe that there are certain areas that are beyond our comprehension. But we have to establish prayers and we have to spend on whatever He has given us in order to reach to that kind of goal. We have this team of experts and intellectuals and scholars and laypersons and students of the Quran reflecting on the message primarily to make the point that it is within the reach of each and every individual to relate to the Quran, even though if they do not know the language and even though if they do not believe in that message initially. They can all get an understanding of what a divine wants and why He wants and what is the essence of that message. We've had previous speakers focusing on many of those things. And yesterday we had Aiman Pervaiz, who is a computer scientist, a programmer, who was born in India and then studied in the United States, now settled in Canada, who yesterday gave a reflection on the truth that the majority would not decide and determine what the truth is. Today he would be talking about eat and drink, but do not overspend. And it is a verse of the Quran. And welcome, Aiman. The floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Aiman Pervaiz and the topic for today's discussion is eat and drink but be not excessive, 7/31. The order of talking points here would be, first we'll talk about abdication. Is abdication of worldly comforts necessary to accept Iman? Then we'll look at what differentiates a Muslim, somebody who lives by Quran versus others in terms of this resource utilization. And lastly, we'll take a look at what happens when we cross the limits laid down by God. Abdication. So our life on earth is an opportunity to bring ourselves in sync with God's directives, which is Quran. And we do that, we bring ourselves in sync by following Quran. We live by it, and then we grow as Muslims and qualify ourselves for heaven or Jannah. When we live our lives according to Quran, God has promised that we will have a blissful, respectable, and comfortable life, both in this world and hereafter. Let's take a look at Quran's ayat 16/97. As for anyone, man or woman, who does righteous deeds and attains to conviction, we will certainly cause him to live a good life. 10/64. For them there is glad tidings of happiness in the life of this world. So as we see here that the concept of comforts, creature comforts, is not something which is against the idea of the Quran. Rather, they are natural outcome of following Quran, living by it, that is ibadah. Quran, brothers and sisters, is ordained on us, and hence living according to Quran is ordained on us. 28/85. Verily, he who ordained the Quran for thee will bring thee back to the place of return. So as we see here that we are expected to live our lives according to Quran. And if we do, we will, a natural outcome of that kind of lifestyle or that kind of approach in life is to have a blissful, prosperous, and comfortable life. So as we can see very clearly here that Quran doesn't say anything about abdication. Rather, Quran says that if we live our lives according to God's directives, then these comforts will be a natural outcome, and hence they very much have a place in Deen. So then, if you look at from a high level to an untrained eye, both a person living by Quran, that's Muslim, and somebody who's not, both of them would appear to be working towards the same goals. Both of them would appear to be living same kind of a lifestyle or same kind of life. So what differentiates between a Muslim and a non-Muslim? That would be determined, brothers and sisters, by how those earnings are, those resources, those blessings are earned, and how we utilize them. A Muslim, for instance, would always keep an eye on the bigger goal. He would always understand that this life is fleeting gains, and at the end of the day, life hereafter is something for which we are working towards. The passage goes through this life. So a quality of life here, how pious Muslims we are, how much we are following Quran affects our quality of life here, which in turn affects our quality of life in the hereafter. So a Muslim's approach would always be dual-fold and would always be in sync with Quran, because then only he'll be uh, successful in having a good life both here and hereafter. A Muslim, for instance, would never adopt a practice which spreads corruption or facade in the society for personal gain. And this is something which we see every day. I mean, there are so many businesses in the world which are creating all sorts of havoc on nature, and is affecting us in a day-to-day life. Somebody who's living by the ideology of the Quran get would never take an approach which would lead to that kind of a corruption, that kind of a disruption of the environment, or for that matter, anything. The other aspect which differentiates one group from the other is how they're utilizing these resources. So somebody living by Quran, a Muslim, would understand that these resources, these blessings which have been, which he has earned through his hard work, and God has given it to him, he is a custodian of those resources. He's not the owner of those resources. And it's an opportunity for us to grow and become better Muslims in terms of how we end up utilizing those resources. We have to see that, are we utilizing them for upliftment of humanity? Are we keeping them open for the nourishment of mankind, or are we just using them for our selfish needs on ourselves and our children? One point I want to clarify here is that Quran doesn't say that you don't spend anything on yourself. Quran gives us guiding principles in how much we should spend on ourselves. Quran talks about a minimalist lifestyle. Quran talks about differentiating between want and need. So those are the things that you need to keep in mind in figuring out how much we should keep for ourselves, how much we should spend on our own selves, and how much we should keep open for others. When we follow these guiding principles of the Quran in terms of resource management, this approach, which is very prevalent these days, that it's my money and I'll spend it my way, is not approach which Quran approves of. It's not an approach which a Muslim is supposed to adopt. Muslim is supposed to put his needs, put others' needs in front of his own needs, so that he can help others out and strike balance in the society. Let's take a look at few ayahs in Quran which talk about the same point. 17/26. And give the relative his rights, and the destitute and the traveler in need, and do not squander wastefully. We see here that Quran talks about doing justice to everything, doing justice to everyone. This can be a relative or destitute or a business partner. The concept here is that we should do justice to all our commitments, to all our agreements, and definitely do not squander wastefully. Quran has said that we should never squander wastefully. And the problem and the point which I want to highlight here is, and this is, I think, the challenge for majority of us, that when we live in a society, we all are subjected to various kind of social pressures. And that is where we have to be very careful, because Quran teaches us to differentiate between need and want. Quran teaches us that we should keep others' needs before us. And when we go by those principles, they might not be uh, they might not be a very popular opinion in the society, because society says that, spend everything on yourselves. Upward mobility is what you're looking for. Always go in for something bigger, something better. But that's not what Quran says. 60116, O Rasul, if you were to follow the majority in the land, they would lead you astray from path of Allah. Again, as building on what the point which I was mentioning, that we have to make sure that we do what Quran says, because the Quran is what is ordained on us. That is what we will be questioned upon on the day of judgment. That did we follow Quran or did we follow somebody else? Whomever we follow, irrespective whomever we follow, if we are not following the divine guidance, we are not doing, and our actions won't be accepted in the eyes of God, and we would have to face the consequences. Another point to understand here is, brothers and sisters, and going back to my first slide, that we have been sent on earth to grow, to qualify, and to qualify for Jannah, to qualify for heaven. And the concept and the way the growth of our soul happens is very different from the way the growth of our body happens. In order to grow our body, a physical body, we have to consume. We have to consume and consume and consume. Whereas the growth of soul happens is completely opposite. The growth of soul happens the more we give, the more we serve. And that's the whole purpose of being sent or sent in this world, to grow as Muslims, to grow our soul. And we have been told that in order to grow that soul, we have to serve others. We have to live by Quran, and Quran says to serve others. And the more we serve, the more our soul grows. So this basically determines how these resources should be utilized by somebody who understands Quran and wants to live by it and wants to be successful in both the lives. And so this is, I think, a major differentiating factor between the two groups. Resource utilization, how we utilize those resources. Whenever we, okay, let me back up a bit. Everything in nature created by God is in perfect balance. We can look around and we see balance everywhere. In Quran, God says that we should respect this balance and we should not disrupt it. Whenever we enter the excessive realm, we are crossing the limits. We are disrupting the balance. 26 of 152, who spread corruption throughout the land, never setting things right. So corruption can never set things right. And if we look at the concept of balance logically, we can see that whenever we are disrupting a balance, we take something from one side and give it to the other side. So other side becomes heavy. The side which is losing something becomes lighter. That's the whole concept of a balance. So when we disrupt the balance and we do something excessive, and just a tangent point here, this is not just related to resources. You can be excessive in your emotions. You can be excessive in your spending and whatnot. But this is a general concept that whenever we disrupt balance, whenever we get excessive, we are taking someone else's share. And that is something which is absolutely not acceptable in the Quran's philosophy. 26 over 183, do not deprive people of what is rightfully theirs. So when we deprive people, when we get into excessive realm, when we are disrupting the balance, we are taking something which was rightfully someone else's. That we might not even know who that was. That someone might not show up on our doorstep and protest and ask. But that if you look at the bigger picture, whenever you're crossing a limit, you are taking someone else's share. And this is where, I mean, let's go back a couple of slides. If you remember, that's if you have the resources and you're utilizing them in accordance to the Quran, then you're not creating excess. You are not taking away someone else's portion, because you are following the Quran's directive of a minimalist lifestyle of need versus want, and then just utilizing those resources to the minimal extent for your own purposes, and then keeping the majority open for the humanitarian purposes. Then whosoever has a deficiency, whosoever has lost balance in his life in terms of resources, in terms of money, emotions, whatever, he can then come in and share that, take that from your open pool and restore balance in his own life, and eventually restore balance in the society. And that's the purpose of this ummah, brothers and sisters. We have been sent down on earth in order to, as I said, grow, how do we grow? We grow by serving others, and when we serve others, we restore balance in others' life, and then eventually in the society. That's the whole purpose of this ummah. And that's the reason we have been asked to follow the divine guidance, because it eventually leads to a balance across human society, just like balance has been established in outer universe. Another point which I want to talk about here, which is a very subtle one, and we usually tend to ignore it, is that whenever we are crossing limits, whenever we are entering the excessive reign, we are setting up a wrong social precedence. And it is a vicious circle, which we will see in the next slide. And in order to explain this point of wrong social precedence, I want to take up the concept, I want to take up the social custom of lavish weddings and marriages in Indian subcontinent. If you guys are not aware, if some of you are not aware of it, weddings and marriages in Indian subcontinent, they're extremely lavish. People spend millions in order to on their marriages, on their weddings, and it's a accepted social norm. That's a standard which has been set now. The bar is so high that anybody who's not able to meet those standards is looked down upon. And that is creating a lot of issues in India, because India is not a very rich country, and majority of the population is still poor. And when they are forced to meet those demands, those standards, those social standards, the amount of hassle they have to go through, and it completely changes the focus of their life, and how they manage these resources, and what they have to do by hook or by crook to gather that kind of money in order to have those kind of weddings, those marriages. So it's a vicious circle, and I'll try my best to throw some light upon it. I mean, whenever we cross a limit, we enter the excess realm, we are setting the bar, we are setting a wrong precedence, we are setting setting the bar pretty high, because balance is lost. We are setting it high, obviously. And then what happens? In order to maintain that bar, there is an inherent rat race happening, or it triggers a rat race. In North American culture, we call it keeping up with Joneses. Basically, we are in a constant hustle. We are in a constant race to get something bigger, something better from our neighbors, or trying to keep up with the social circle, because everybody is doing it that way. That's a standard of living which everybody, each one of us, each one of our friends in a circle is living by. So we are supposed to live by it. Unfortunately, the reason why we get stuck in this cycle is because most of us are either not aware of the Quran, or even if they are, they are unable to stand up to the peer pressure. When you when you abide by Quran, it imparts strength in your character, that you can stand up to those peer pressures and you can do the right thing, which might not be the most popular opinion. And fortunately, since most of us are not connected to Quran in that manner, we don't understand Quran. We can recite it, we don't understand it, we don't know that we have to live by it. Then obviously we lack that strength to stand up to those peer pressures, and we end up getting stuck in this rat race. What happens then? Then you're constantly working towards, basically you're working towards validating yourself to the society that you're worth something. And for that, you are constantly hoarding up resources. You are losing balance. You are not doing justice to all other responsibilities as a father, as a mother, let's say, as a brother, sister, civil, as a neighbor and whatnot. You just let go of everything. You focus on one thing, and it's a rat race. And we basically live in each his own kind of a world where nobody cares about anyone else. The goal of humanitarian beneficial work is completely lost. Everybody is just focused on saving up enough to meet those standards. And then what happens, what it leads to is evident across the globe right now. It leads to wealth inequality or social problems. And this is something which is a pretty hot topic right now, given the pandemic, and the increase in wealth of billionaires has been like several folds, whereas an average Joe is still struggling to meet his basic needs. And this basically tells us that, I mean, I started off with one social custom in one part of the world, in the Indian subcontinent, and we have ended on, and we are concluding this cycle on the pandemic and how billionaires are the ones making the most of it and not really caring about someone else. So this tells us that how impactful these wrong social practices are, what kind of precedence does it set, what impact does it have on the society and on each individual's life. Going back to India's point, I mean, as I said, majority of the country is poor, and getting people and getting your kids married off is a huge, huge challenge. It's been seen as a burden. Rather than focusing on what kind of spouse or groom and bride they are looking for their kids, or what kind of potential partner you should be looking out for, nobody cares about any of this. All of your focus is on how many dishes are being served in that function, in that event, what kind of dresses people are wearing. It just turns into a show-off event rather than understanding the importance of finding a good partner for your kids or for oneself. So this is just one ayat which we talked about here, and it tells us that how it addresses the social problems which we are facing right now. I mean, the wealth inequality issue, I mean, we have people like Bernie Sanders who are fighting these big corps, trying to get money out of them to help other people out who are missing out on their basic needs. So we started like one part of the world, which was definitely not a first world country, and then this ayat and the scope of this ayat, the impact which it has on society is covering pretty much from underdeveloped third world countries to first world countries. So that tells us that the landscape which this ayat touches, and that is a testimony to how great God is, that the landscape which this ayat covers is the whole world pretty much, and we are seeing that how just not abiding this one ayat, just not abiding by the limits which God has laid down, we are facing problems now across the globe in the society, and each one of us is getting affected by it. So with this, I would like to conclude, and I would like to, I hope that I was able to touch base on points and throw light on some thought-provoking points out here for each one of us. And I hope that we gather courage to live our lives according to Quran in these times and do our bit in order to restore balance in this world and make lives easy for everybody, including ourselves. Thanks a lot. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Aiman, for your presentation. And we have Brother Aleem with us, the Director of Islamic Society, to have a further discussion on that issue. And I would be discussing issues with him. He has a lot of questions, and definitely we would try to see how that fits within the framework of the ideas that Aiman has presented. Brother Aleem, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Aslam. When I was listening to Aiman's presentation, the first thing that came to my mind was climate change. How is this verse related to climate change? Maybe if you can reflect on that, or is it related to this aspect of extravagance? Is that related to climate change?
I think the verse relates to every aspect of using resources, whether it is the earthly resources, whether it is the financial resources, whether it is our own physical resources, whether it relates with our family, our community, our environment, everything comes into that. Because the assumption is that we as human beings have been given the custodianship of the resources that exist. We have been given control over ourselves and over everything. Control in the sense that it would be a kind of a responsibility on our part to use them in a manner which serves the purpose of our creation. And that is to be grateful to God for what He has given. That is to ensure that the benefit of human beings are taken care of, interests of human beings are taken care of, and to ensure that the dignity of human being is taken care of. Anything that violates these principles would become transgression, would become overspending, would become a contradiction to the responsibilities that God has given us. And it is in that particular context what we have to see. Climate change is something that is impacting all those people. It is impacting people in Africa who don't even have a day meal with them. It is impacting people in Latin America who have no control over their environment. It is impacting everything that is uh, habited all over the world. It is impacting animals, it is impacting fish, it is impacting everything. And why is it impacting? It is not because the nature wants it to happen, because we human beings have been misusing the resources to serve certain temporary interests of some people at a particular point of history who are mismanaging their resources, who are not making those resources useful in a manner that would enable everyone, even though they have created mass production and mass transportation, yet those mass production and mass transportation have resulted in actions that basically is changing the balance that exists in this universe. So that is where the problem is, and you can trickle it down to everything. When we overeat, we create problems. When we overspend, we create problems. When we overuse the capacities of the earth, it creates problems. When we overproduce, it creates problems. All those things. It's a common sense thing that you can have even without applying the critical thinking. But because we have become so greedy and we have become so much materialistic that the humanity and the human beings don't count to us. We don't care if 1.6 billion people sleep hungry in our world while we dump milk and butter and the food in the oceans in the United States and in Canada, while we hoard all those things. You know, we have more than 1 billion doses of vaccination of COVID. But Africa, 90% of Africa's population is without those kind of vaccination, even though we have enough. So this has to do not with, I think, the bounties, but it's the misuse of the bounties that God has given us. And the climate change, of course, is something that is going to impact each and every one, has impacted each and every one of us, and it would definitely create further problems for all of us.
So this verse is specifically talking about eat and drinking. And of course, there's a very clear parallel here with the 7 deadly sins that are mentioned in the Bible also, right, in terms of gluttony. But looking at this, not just in the sense of eating and drinking, but a much broader aspect of gluttony, not related to just eating and drinking, but this excessive nature. I think that's a very important part of trying to understand this verse and other verses, similar verses that are in the Quran.
I think everything is coming around this issue of eating and drinking. Much of the wars, much of the fight among the nations is on water, on basically using the earth to produce more and more, which we don't even need sometimes. I mean, there's no shortage of what we produce. In fact, we are producing in abundance, but we're not managing it properly. whether as a family, as an individual, or as a, a nation. Individually, it impacts our health. When we overeat, we eat in excessive, misuse the resources, they become extravagant, we transgress, and we create imbalance in our physical sense, we create that kind of problem. When we
So,
do the same kind of thing with nations, we create the problems for the entire nation.
right.
So it
So,
relates with that. Yes.
right. So how do we actually also, can you maybe put this in this context of there's a movement of adopting a minimalistic lifestyle, and there's an entire field of study now, minimalism, right? And how do we maybe look at that in terms of the Quranic directions that have been given to us? Now there is this entire science that is being developed around this now.
I mean, the issue is not how much. The issue is what is necessary. Now, for instance, at one place, people ask, how much should we spend? And then the response of the Quran, what is beyond your needs? Who would determine what needs are? There are certain physical realities that would determine what the needs are, and then our wants would also determine what our needs are, our desires. And it is in that particular sense the Quran says that control your desires based on the realities, based on the necessities that the experts would tell us. If the nutritionists are telling us, if those who understand our anatomy, that this is what we need in order to survive, in order to be healthy, in order to move forward with our physical strength, and that is what we should focus on. But this is not what is presented as as a truth. I think it is more related with materialistic in the sense that that more you would have, the more successful you will be considered, even though you can survive on a small scooter or a small motorcycle or a small vehicle, yet you should have a bigger vehicle that consumes more gas, and that even though the purpose is the same, it's just a matter of symbol of your prestige, and that we should produce more and more, and then add different kind of processes to make people habit of that, addicted to all those kinds. So this is what is happening. It is in that particular sense that we have to basically be careful. Again, going back to the Quranic word, alaykum anfusikum, you have to be responsible for yourself. If we are not responsible to ourselves, we will always be led by those people who have their ulterior interests. Why would a person who is making a refrigerator that is contaminating our pure air and emitting gases, not sell his product if he knows that we can sell more and more products in order to give that kind of incentive to people. So we need to basically invest in alternative things that would protect our environment, that would protect our health, that would protect our families, that would protect our resources in a manner that we leave things for our coming generations also. But this is not what basically our materialistic world tells us. Our materialistic world tells us that there is, the sky is the limit. You can do whatever you want. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, that be careful. You have a responsibility because you should not create your conditions. Right? By having, by producing so much for 331 million people in the United States, we feel that we have accomplished the goals. But what about was 1.6 billion people? If you believe in the humanity, if you believe that people have the right to exist in their own identity, in their own. So this is where basically we have to focus on, that we have to basically understand what our necessities are, what is it that would keep us moving, what is it that would keep us alive, and what is it that would keep a balance in the nature. That is what our priorities are, and that we have not focused on that at all.
So is excessiveness a relative concept? So what is excessive for me, may not be excessive for someone else. Someone who can afford a 10-bedroom house and is living in a 5-bedroom house, he's being minimalistic. Someone who has a 1-bedroom house and compared to someone who has no house, could seem excessive. So how do you understand this aspect of excessiveness?
Now, what I think, let's go back to the principle. What is necessity? That every human being, as the Quran also says that every human being deserves dignity, and the dignity is also defined in the physical sense that he should have food to eat, he should have a roof to have, and he should have clothes to cover one's body. Now, in that particular respect, these are the needs that human beings have to take care of each other. It is in this particular context of the Quran. Now, again, the needs would determine on the individual's necessities. For instance, if somebody has a big family, certainly you would not give them the same kind of ration that you would give to a person who is single. So that necessity would be determined based on the needs of that individual, that kind of, and those individuals would be honest. That is the presumption of the Quran in terms of determining and deciding what exactly they need, because the purpose again is the dignity. The purpose is not to have more bigger houses, the purpose. So it is that kind of concept that the Quran is promoting. And that's why it's a talk of a collective relationship with a social, setup where these things are determined on the basis of what is needed by others. That everyone would participate in economic activities, everyone would be part of the labor force, and the people would get a reward based on what their essential needs are. In that needs, there are some people who might need more, there are some people who might need more. That does not mean that they are not equal in terms of contributing or in terms of getting benefit, because ultimately the equality does not mean that each one of us have to eat the same kind of food. Equality simply means that each one of us should eat food so that we could survive and we could move forward. So it is these kind of concepts that we have to look into and then see where we go, that the human beings have to basically tame their own desires and their own greediness in terms of holding and hoarding the resources that God has created in this universe. Because the moment we start hoarding and misusing the resources, we are basically denying some other person their right to have those kind of resources or to have a share of those resources.
So, so that's a very good way of looking at it, I think. And also, I think if you look at the actual word in the Quran that is being used here in this context, in this verse 731, that is being translated as extravagant, is the root word is israf.
Yes.
And
Saraf.
it's saraf. It's saraf, and that means basically transgression.
Yes.
So transgression could mean that based on the resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given an individual, how he or she uses those resources
Indeed.
would be considered a transgression or the correct use of that. So it's not relative, basically. Then.
Yeah. Let me give you an example. For instance, I'm diabetic. I was not diabetic 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But that was the time when I was careless. I did not focus on balanced food. I did not focus on eating at the right time. I sometimes overeat. I sometimes ate things that I unconsciously, promoted the diabetes. Now I'm suffering the consequences of that kind of imbalance. So similarly, if humanity is suffering as a result of this kind of hunger, this kind of issues where the distribution is not properly done, it is our behavior, our attitude, our greed that basically is contributing. I mean, why is it that the United States is spending $768 billion on its army, and China is spending nearly 400 billion, and India is spending nearly 100 billion, while we don't have enough drinking water in India or in parts of Africa? What is the priority? And that comes from our ideological understanding that because all what we are doing is a response to our ethnic, our cultural, our political understanding of ourselves and misusing the resources that God has given to us. And it is that kind of understanding that needs to be the foundation in order to move forward, in order to take human beings and human society at a different level. At that time, we are basically worse than animalistic instincts. Each for oneself, we will kill each other or the resources for our own benefit. We don't care about what is happening to earth and ocean and other creation or other human beings. We care for ourselves. And in that respect, we can do whatever we want to do. That is what the Quran is saying, that don't be transparent. Don't be extravagant in that respect. And don't transgress because you would hurt yourself in the long run.
Yeah, so basically, I think what the crisis is that our spirit is not in balance.
Indeed.
If our entire understanding and spirit is in balance, our personal lives would be in balance, the environment around us would be in balance. And of course, if everyone is in that process, is in that same state, we can expect that the entire world, country, neighborhoods would be in balance. So
I think, it ultimately takes back to the fundamental question that we must ask. Now, what is the purpose of this life? And in that respect, there are two clear-cut paths. One group of people says that this life is all, and we should make the best use of this particular life in every sense of the term. Some of the people say that, well, yeah, we will make the best use of the people, but let's give some bribe to God by offering some prayers to him, by chanting some verses for him, and by basically doing some rituals to him so that, we keep a balance, but this is not the balance. But there is another group that believes that the life has a purpose. And the purpose of this life is not only to enhance one's own self, one's own personality, evolve into a being that is very useful, very beneficial for humanity, that basically explores the universe, that understands the pains and sufferings of the fellow human beings, and that comes to that the help of that individual. And Muslims claim to be in that group where we say that we believe in a life hereafter, we believe in a purpose. But when we look at the reality, we find the Muslims no different than the first group. You know, the the princes of several Gulf countries have in their account billions of dollars that, if used properly, can help eliminate poverty and hunger from the Muslim world. But it doesn't happen. So it again takes us back. And somehow we have messed our own understanding about the purpose of this particular life. The purpose of this particular life is not to transgress in every sense of the term, in food, in our relationship, in our desires, in or even in the development. Yes, we know there are no limits because the God's bounties are limitless. But as the Quran says, لِكُلِّ نَبَإٍ مُسْتَقَرٌ. For every news, for every invention, there is a time. And that time would be determined on the basis of the balance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala maintains in this universe. And that is what our responsibilities as Muslims are. We cannot dictate our terms upon others. You cannot dictate even terms upon our other fellow Muslims. But at least this is a message that we need to communicate to each other, that our responsibilities in this universe is to create a balance in every aspect of our life. And more important, in the issues related to the climate, because if the earth is contaminated and polluted, then each one of us would not have a balanced life.
Absolutely. So another thing that Aiman touched on, he talked about extravagance, and he mentioned marriage ceremonies, how people are spending in marriage ceremonies in India and in the subcontinent. Well, we know that it's not just limited to India and the subcontinent. Even here,
Yes,
the amount of money that people spend on marriages or other ceremonies are just beyond extravagant. And now this pandemic has really exposed that, where people are going back to a very minimalistic, ceremony, and they're seeing that, and they're seeing that this can be as enjoyable as spending lavishly, right? And it's
I
more
think
intimate and so on. So my question there is, do you think that this pandemic will teach humanity a lesson in terms of moving us back to a more down-to-earth lifestyle where we avoid these excessives and transgressions?
I think the last question is first, is that this pandemic has definitely taught us that we are interdependent, that what happens in China would have an impact on the US and in Africa. And what is beneficial for people in the United States would also have some benefit for people in India and other places. That the research that is done for the purpose of alleviating human beings from the kind of issues that they are is a universal phenomena. And definitely this is how we have to proceed in the future, to work together, to be helpful to each other. That is one thing that we have to understand. Now, the second issue is about the extravagance in the marriages. I think, first of all, let's be realistic about the scope of the issue. Nearly 70% of the Muslim world population lives, and the world population lives below the poverty line. They don't have means, even to survive. And some of them might feel tempted to basically spend or overspend on their marriages in order to basically be accepted in the community and all those things. But this is what the responsibility of the religious leadership is. This is what the responsibility of those who are social leaders of the communities are, that they need to take a stand on that issue. I give you an example. There is a place called Burhanpur in India. It has a substantial number of Muslims. The elders of the community decided that all the weddings would take place in a communal manner, in the sense that there will not be any extravagant, and on a particular day of a particular month, whatever they decide, all those who were planning to get married would get married with the minimal expenses, because the community would collect the resources to take care of the guests. Only certain drinks would be offered to them, and no extravagant food and all those things. So I attended one such a wedding where 18 couples were wedded, and the entire town was there to greet those couples, and there was very minimal expense that was there. And the families did not even give the dowry. They basically, is that community that had collected the resources basically gave certain standard things to all the family members. So it is the responsibility of those people to basically have it, because the people sometimes act on the basis of their impulses and the basis of what basically they have been watching, from their forefathers. This is what they basically saw, or heard that their forefathers did, and this is what they basically tend to do. So it becomes a responsibility. I think one of the major problems with our scholarship and our leadership is that we are not focusing on the real issue. If, for instance, I, as a person who performs the nikah, refuse to be part of that ceremony where there would be extravagance, and if others also do that kind of thing, then probably the community would have to think about it. And now I see, during this pandemic, also even before the pandemic, many young people basically are taking a stand on those kind of issues and saying, this is not what basically we would want, us to be known for being extravagant. So and I think I attended your daughter's wedding also. It was simple. There was no extravagance. Yes, you entertained the guests, but those were the guests that were close family and friends. So I think extravagance means when you go out of the way to borrow money and to spend from things that you could have spent for other causes. So it is in that particular context we have to look at it. And it is not only about wedding, it is the birth also. It is also when we have special ceremonies like a person completing the Quran, or starting to start reading the Quran. All those kind of ceremonies and events sometimes inspire people to spend more than what their capacity is, and this is what we should focus on.
Well, yes, thank you for bringing up my daughter's wedding. We did try and keep it at a very simple level.
Yeah, it was simple, yes.
But my checkbook still said it was extravagant, I think. But inshallah, we all are struggling and striving to make sure that we can find that balance in our lives. One other thing, this last point maybe I'll make. This aspect of extravagance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about, there's a flip side to that also, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, do not be extreme in the opposite sense, in terms of denying yourself also. So there's this balance that we create in our lives, right? Of when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us resources, that we appreciate those resources, we use it in a balanced way, but we do not actually go to the other extreme in terms of denying ourselves and our families of everything, where we see this extreme, even religious people who impose these restrictions on themselves also.
Indeed. Yeah. I think if I'm sure that you know it more than me, because you have you're running an organization, and you are running a major Muslim organization, that is IslamiCity. That financial experts, those who are management experts, tell us to be balanced, and they say that if you are not balanced in your income and expenditures, if you're not balanced in maintaining the quality of the work, you would basically disappear, you would lose relevance. And this is what the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, that don't be niggardly to such an extent that you would deny yourself the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and don't overspend so that you misuse those kind of resources. And that is the message that the Quran is constantly giving us, that we should not go to extremes. There are people, for instance, this is the month of fasting, and when people ask people, can we fast for 24 hours? Can we fast for 72 hours? The Prophet is strictly prohibited that. And strictly said that it is from sunset to sunrise to sunset, and that was also in the context of Arabia, where the hours of days were really fixed, not like in Antarctica, where you have 6 months a day and 6 months night. And there people basically have to have a different understanding of those kind of time. So the Prophet here and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very rational in this sense, that one has to be balanced. One is not demanding extreme. One is not saying that if you are hungry and you are about to die, then you can even eat those things that are prohibited legally in the Nas. So all these things have to be taken into consideration, and I think the balanced life is the one. But what is a balanced life? That is something that we have to have knowledge about, because sometimes we also do not have a very accurate understanding of what the balance is. Sometimes we think that what we have been handed down to us by our forefathers is the rightful thing and the balanced thing. But this is what basically we have to have, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's Prophet constantly said, and the dua is preserved in the Quran, Rabbi zidni ilman kasira, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, help me increase my knowledge. Well, you can say, the people say, what knowledge? The Quran is already there. No, Quran is saying that there are knowledge beyond Quran also that you have to discover. And this is something that we still refuse to accept, that there's a knowledge that Allah's Prophet and Allah asked us to increase, even though the Quran is there. What is that knowledge? That is the knowledge about ourselves, about our universe, about our anatomy, about everything that exists, so that we could understand the real dynamics of the world and real balancing of the world and move forward.
Well, again, as always, I enjoyed these discussions. Wish we had more time to keep on discussing these and exploring these different boundaries of our faith. But in the interest of time, I'll conclude my reflections and questions now.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Aiman, for your presentation. I hope that we were within the framework of your thought process. So inshallah, we'll return tomorrow, and tomorrow I will be giving the reflections, and Brother Ali would be the one conducting that program live from IslamiCity and from Los Angeles. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful night and have a wonderful suhoor. And please remember that we are in the last 10 days of Ramadan, and these are the nights that are considered blessed in its odd days. So please make full use of those nights. With salam from IslamiCity. Thank you very much. Masalam.